her teaching and her lectures, she also is someone who was a trailblazer in which she entered into an area of Jewish art which had not been studied already. I'm delighted to call her to give her presentation.
We'll start off with, can you hear me? Seems to be the major question. The presentation that I'm giving today is a very, very shortened version of a large article that I wrote in a book on Abraham, which will be coming out in the near future with his name and the subtitle Mountain Field Home. So, you should just know that I'm going to read, which I don't usually do, in order to try to get everything in, which is really just a small segment of what I wrote, into the required time. Abraham presents a unique vision of the Zionist dream and the conflict between Jews and Arabs. Making no concessions to political correctness, he juxtaposes images that make us reevaluate Israel's ability to fulfill its goals. His approach is inspired by his background. Born in Morocco, he was kidnapped for a day by Muslims at the age of 3, witnessed Muslims brutally slaying Jews, and at the age of 10 fled with his family in the dead of night, arriving in Israel in 1956. In his youth, he attended the Eichmann trial and became obsessed with the Holocaust. As a refugee, he understands the Palestinians' plight, but having built a new life in Israel, he rebels against the hate bred by the enforced continuation of their refugee status. He sees this hatred as a continuation of the anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust and takes seriously the threat posed by militant Islam. As a religious Jew, he sees Israel through the prism of biblical prophecies on the ingathering of the exiles and believes that in every generation they rise against us to destroy us now pertains to the Arab-Israel struggle. While retaining hope for peace, he tries to make Israelis consider whether Israel has fulfilled its declared mission. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what I do to get this to move. There we go. Okay. Muhammad began as an abstract artist using geometric forms without ideological content, until the shock of the Yom Kippur War dramatically changed his imagery. In the pessimistic, dismantled Star of David, of 1973, the sharp, jarring forms point aggressively inward upon themselves and outward at us. The star is set on cylinders that recall both Torah finials and the legs of an anthropomorphic figure with a sharp head, outstretched arms, and a disturbing hole in its body. During the 1980s, Balhama spent many years abroad, encouraging immigration to Israel at the Jewish Agency. As he watched the Gulf War and the First Intifada on television, he again became aware of Israel's vulnerability, and his fears were reaffirmed by the Oslo Accords of 1993 to 95 that returned land for a peace that he believed was an illusion. In 1994, he again broke up the star in a metal sculpture painted bright yellow. One triangle points outwards aggressively. Here's the triangle. While the other decomposes into a sharp angular spiral. This yellow Star of David recalls those of the Holocaust, while the broken shapes suggest the fate of the Jews who wore them. However, the statue has a covert political meaning, expressing Bar Hama's disbelief in the Oslo Accords. The Star of David that developed in 1995 from a statue exhibited in July 1973, in other words, before the Yom Kippur War, carries a different message. From the side, it remains a minimalist sculpture. But in front, the way the light reflects off the angles around the hole creates the illusion of a Star of David. The title, Present Absent, stresses the mystical way the star's shadowy image hovers in the light without actually being there, but also suggests that although Israel is now a fact, its existence is still in question. To stress this aspect, when he re-exhibited it in 2000, he called it National Hope. This political nuance explains why he set this work in 1995 between two statues in an arrangement he never exhibited. In front stands In Every Generation, a suitcase frame with a mirror at the bottom that reflects whoever stands above it. And you can see his reflection here in the suitcase. This makes the person standing there into a wandering Jew. Made for his 1995 struggle show, it was set there near a cube made of a frame of metal bars to suggest a sukkah, a home that looks stable and secure, but this is really an illusion, says the artist. Behind the star is a model for the memorial of the fallen that he would build in Kiryat Gat. Present absent, the mystical hovering Star of David stands between wandering and dying for Israel's survival. Its meaning works best in Hebrew. Nochach ne'edar are the two answers to a roll call, but ne'edar also means missing in action. In his 2000 show, Make Unto Me an Altar of Earth, he again dealt with the transience of life to preserve the land of Israel, explaining pessimistically. Unwillingly, Eretz Yisrael is becoming the estate of the Jewish people only through the burial of the sons in its earth. In Altar of Earth grave basis, the grid set on a bed of earth represents the concrete outlines of graves prepared for the dead in Israeli cemeteries. The altar suggests dying for the land of Israel, and was created the day after the army left Lebanon in the hope that no more sacrifices would be needed. Outside the Tel Aviv street, Bar Hama erected a concrete grave grid filled with earth. Angry that Tel Avivians felt detached from the soldiers in Lebanon, he brought home to them light in the shadow of death. On the last day of the show, he wrote flowers instead of grave on the grid and invited the public to plant flowers in the grave to stress his wish for peace rather than continuous sacrifice. In 2004, Bar Hama was in Paris accumulating material for a Holocaust show. When, on May 2nd, Tali Hatuel and her 4 daughters, aged 2 to 11, were shot in Gush Katif by terrorists who closed in to finish them off. Before turning to the Holocaust, Bahama decided to deal with Israel's current problems. His first reaction to the tragedy seemed straightforward. Since Tali Hatuel had been pregnant, he superimposed a sonogram of a fetus on eggs that may encase fetuses. The fragility of the eggs is stressed by the water below them, in which their diffracted reflections crack. The first lines of the text from the Mishnah's Beitzah chapter, Sefer Moed, suggest the artist's message. An egg that is born on a holiday. Shammai's school says, eat it. Hillel's school says, don't eat it. The question of whether to allow an ex-fetus to live is reinforced in the second line, which deals with whether to slaughter an animal on a holiday. The combination of the text and pictures questions why Tali Hatuel's unborn child was not allowed to live. This work was then superimposed on a photograph of the declaration of the State of Israel in Tel Aviv in May 1948. Ben Gurion is symbolically enclosed in an egg, while Herzl is in the sonogram. The holiday, Moed, is the day the state was proclaimed. The work raises two questions. How could a pregnant woman be murdered after the birth of the state? And what does this tell us of the fragility of a state that can be crushed like an egg, its fetus killed? In You Know, Will These Bones Live? Bahama expands this imagery. The title reverses the order of Ezekiel 37:3, where God asks whether the bones will live, and Ezekiel answers, you knew. Now you knew is set under Herzl and around Ben Gurion's head. Referring to the prophet and the founder of the state. Will these bones live appears between the declaration of the state and two photographs. Bodies of the Holocaust dead in a wagon lie beneath the 5 wrapped Hatuel corpses in a mass grave. Below, he added the beginning of Chaim Gui's poem honoring the 35 Jewish soldiers killed by Arabs on their way to relieve Gush Etzion in January 1948. Look, here our bodies are cast in a long, long row. Our faces have changed. Death is reflected from our eyes. We do not breathe. The use of Ezekiel's vision to connect the Holocaust to the rebirth of Israel is conventional, but not the two other associations. The massacre of soldiers is related to the idea of sacrificing oneself for one's country, and the two echo the slogan, Holocaust and heroism, as a basis for the state. The inclusion of the Hatuel family presents the new victims of the age-old hatred. The artist suggests that before the birth of the state, such victims were understandable. But how could the Hatuel massacre occur in 2004 after Israel had existed for over 50 years? The comparison of Gush Etzion and Gush Katif is also meaningful. In both cases, the mutilated corpses were wrapped and buried in a mass grave. Furthermore, the inhabitants of Gush Etzion were slaughtered on the day before the state was declared. And when this photomontage was created, the state had decided to evacuate Gush Katif, leaving the status of Gush Etzion, which is also beyond the 1967 lines, in question. Gui's poem is also connected to Ezekiel's vision, as it continues with the soldier saying, "Will you really bury us now? We will rise and rush forward as we did then, and we will live once more." In 2005, Bahama also utilized other contrasting images to get his concern for the state's stability across to the Israeli public. In a 1947 poster, Celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Zionist organization and the First Zionist Congress, Herzl stands behind a podium inscribed, "The Jews who want it will achieve their state." But Valhalla senses a flagging of this wish in Jews who give up land in a forlorn hope for peace. By merging Herzl's portrait with a photograph of Arafat, whose people also want a state, he reminds Israelis that there is an ongoing struggle as to which people more earnestly desire to occupy the same piece of land. To elucidate his meaning, in another work, he placed a photograph of Arafat above the words, "Ce n'est pas un paix," playing on René Magritte's painting of a pipe above the words, "Ce n'est pas un pipe." Valhalla states that paix, peace, sounds like peh, mouth, in Hebrew, and that one cannot believe the words issuing from Arafat's open mouth. Valhalla also questions God in a photo montage in which the Hebrew word for "where are you" is written across the sky. The answer, "Here I am," Hineni, appears in red on the body bags of the victims of a bus explosion during the Second Intifada. "Where are you," Ayeka, is only said by God to Adam after the fall. But "here I am," Hineni, appears repeatedly in the Bible in response to God's call. Here the words take on a dual meaning. God's call to the Jews is answered, "Here I am," lying dead, a victim of terrorism. The words can also be read as the cry of the victim pervading the sky, "Where are you, God?" Affected by the Second Lebanon War, the strife within Israel, and revelations of corruption, Valhalla again used the broken Star of David to express Israel's fragility and works that provide different reasons for its dismemberment. In Hidden Light, light breaking on the Star of David, the star is fragmented by bands of light floating in one version, not this one, but another version of the same picture, above a text from the Talmud's Chagigat tractate that deals with the light created on the first day that is hidden from the wicked so that the righteous may use it in the future. The fragmented Star of David here is part of the light hidden until the righteous resume control. The star also breaks down because of the conflict between the secular and ultra-Orthodox. Religion and state, the book and the sword, one nation, creates a parallel between the Haredim dancing and the soldiers talking against the background of a partial Star of David, which you can just about make out in the dark blue. However, national schism, holy and secular, stresses a divided state. Jews pray while a soldier rushes into battle. A torn Israeli flag acts as a prayer shawl with only a triangle tip of the star extant. Other sharp triangles appear behind the soldier, and a composition recalls shards of glass. This work chastises the ultra-Orthodox who shirk their duty, leaving others to defend them. As a religious Jew who fought in the army, Valhalla opposes their unwillingness to serve. Valhalla's concerns for Israel are also expressed in his acerbic Medina Mashtena, state urinal, which can also be read as Medina Mishtana, state changing for the worse. His pessimistic message begins in the upper photo montage, which blends Herzl's profile into the newspaper The Day of the State, issued on May 14, 1948, to report independence. The last stanza of the national anthem is inscribed between Herzl's eyes and mouth. "We have not yet lost our hope, the 2,000-year-old hope to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. However, above a variation on Herzl's words, if you wish it, it is not a legend, mars the positive message. Bar Chama substituted the word Haggadah for Agadah, referring to Heged, a dictum that becomes a mere slogan. However, the change also alludes to the Passover Haggadah, or can also be read, if you wish it, it isn't the West Bank, which is also called Haggadah. Thus, the Zionist dream manifested in the picture turns into an ambiguous play on words. The next frame, below Herzl here, brings quotations from Beryl Katznelson, the Zionist socialist labor leader who believed in retaining Jewish values. It is, and I'm reading now little pieces from the whole long text that's written here. It is natural for generation to revolt against generation, but that a generation should disengage from generations as if they had never been is a special curse. We are cultivating forgetfulness of generations on whose shoulders we stood, of ideas and experiences on the basis of which we fought, and from our struggles became what we are. Seeing ourselves as more ephemeral, more rootless, we believe that we are freer, more superior and energetic. We do not know how to honor ourselves, our works, the fruits of our spirit, our fathers. This text chastises secular Israelis who have lost their heritage. The lack of serious Zionism leads to the third photograph, underneath here, which I didn't enlarge because I think it's obvious, because it exemplifies the rejection of tradition. Marcel Duchamp's fountain, an upside-down urinal. The lower part of the statue is a shiny modern metal urinal whose rectangular opening funnels into the stand. Within, Bar Chama placed a triangle of earth and one of gold. The sloping sides of the receptacle reflect the earth to form a pyramid, and the gold to form a misshapen star, which has 4 points but hints at 6. Its triangles emerge aggressively from the top, making it unpleasant to think of using the urinal. Bar Chama expresses here anger over the ignorance of Judaism that he sees as leading to the corruption of politicians who are turning the state into a urinal. Bar Chama returned to Herzl in a more positive context in 2008 to honor Israel's 60th anniversary. The funeral oration of Jerusalem, Torah, people, and country, was set into a specifically built enclosure outside Tel Aviv's artist's house. At its far end was a photograph of Herzl in Basel during the First Zionist Congress. Superimposed on his head and shoulder is a photograph of Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, whom the ultra-Orthodox attacked for eulogizing Herzl. Under the photographs are references to Rabbi Kook's reply, whose title is used for the installation. Herzl died in 1904 after proposing to the 1903 Zionist Congress that the Jews temporarily settle in Uganda. The opposition claimed that this would forfeit Zionist spiritual values. Rabbi Kook therefore suggested that Herzl was the Messiah, son of Joseph, whose practical material goals would not succeed without the spiritual factor. The inscriptions under the photographs indicate that the installation's message is one needs a union of the material and the spiritual, Herzl and Rabbi Kook. This message is reinforced by the Haaretz newspapers scattered on the floor on either side of altars, here, which run down the middle of the site. Above them, a map of Israel proclaims, "Put off your shoes from your feet." These are God's words to Moses before the burning bush, with 3 dots suggesting the rest of the sentence. "For the place whereon you stand is holy ground." The map is the crux of the old and the contemporary division. The holiness of the land of Israel was the reason for the uproar over the Uganda plan, and it is now the bone of contention between left and right-wing Israelis. Bar Chama calls out here for a union of groups whose disagreements he sees as leading the country into danger. While his maps of Greater Israel stake out the claim of the Jews to the whole land, he headlines an article he wrote in 2003, "Better a united people in a small country than a divided people in Greater Israel." Since he began producing them in 2005, Bar Chama's maps also expressed anxiety over unity and stability. Some of them, made of glass, are even set on the floor to indicate the fragility of the state. Uncertainty was also emphasized in a statue Bar Chama designed for the Beit Sulim school that was actually never carried out. It was composed of several glass-like bats. They weren't made of glass, but they looked like glass, that would reflect and be seen through each other, one layer acting as a shadow against the wall. The way the maps were positioned, one higher than the other, created an illusion of a hole in the central map in the area of the Gaza Strip. Yet the message of the sculpture, written on the shadow, Am Echad, shows that despite everything, we are still one nation. Even if the last words of one seem to get lost in the shadows of the central map here. To stress this message, the map on the right is inscribed, "The nation of Israel, the land of Israel, the Torah of Israel," the 3 primary elements uniting the Jewish people preached by religious Zionism. Yet the multiple maps could also carry a different message. In the computer graphic, blurred borders, the statue was repeated twice in shades that chop up the country and eat away at the inscriptions. One nation is broken. Israel is split in the center between nation and dissolves next to land. While on the left one can still read Torah of Israel, on the right these words melt away, leaving only the first 2 letters. Thus the uncertainty about Israel's borders is destroying both its unity and its religious principles. In 2007, the glass map sculpture was incorporated into another graphic. He hangs the earth above a void, which is taken from Job 26:7, and is a reference to God's power. Here it is the multiple maps of Israel that hang, suspended from heaven, above a wheat field on which rests a map holding the cusps of olives. These are not full olives, but there's a highlight on them and it makes them look like just the shells. The map reflects the aftermath of the withdrawal from Gush Katif, which is called the harvest block.